looking to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching ASEAN in Focus. Joining me today is from our EBC Vietnam Bureau. Hello, Eliana.
Hello, Alma. Good afternoon. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, giving you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. Hackers attacked Myanmar government websites today to protest against the military coup as the junta pressed on with its attempts to stymie nationwide opposition with internet blockades and troop deployments.
Market traders were among the first to benefit from Indonesia's second phase of mass vaccinations against the coronavirus on Wednesday, as the government looks to right the country's pandemic-battered economy.
The Department of Trade and Industry is continuously rolling out programs that will assist the micro, small, and medium enterprises, or MISMIS, survive and thrive amid the pandemic.
Families celebrate Chinese New Year by visiting their family.
EBC Jakarta Bureau's December Paras shows us how a toned-down Chinese New Year was celebrated in Indonesia.
Hackers attacked Myanmar government websites today to protest against the military coup, as the junta pressed on with its attempts to stymie nationwide opposition with internet blockades and troop deployments. The cyber attacks came a day after tens of thousands of people rallied across the country to protest against the general toppling Aung San Suu Kyi civilian government earlier this month. A group called Myanmar Hackers disrupted websites including the central bank, the Myanmar military's propaganda page, state-run broadcaster MRTV, the Port Authority, and the Food and Drug Administration. Cybersecurity expert Matt Warren from Australia's RMIT University said it was likely the aim was to generate publicity. Internet access was severely curtailed for the fourth night running at about 1 a.m. on Thursday, 1830 GMT Wednesday, according to NetBlocks, a Britain-based group that monitors internet outages around the world. It said connectivity had dropped to just 21% of ordinary levels and was restored 8 hours later ahead of the start of the working day. For a second day, some motorists in Yangon blockaded roads with vehicles, leaving their bonnets up and pretending they were broken down to stop the security forces from moving around Myanmar's biggest city.
The lawyer representing Myanmar democracy hero Aung San Suu Kyi said on Wednesday he is preparing for the worst in a trial he fears could take 6 months. Attorney King Mang Zhao is defending the ousted civilian leader who was detained during the February 1 coup on an obscure charge under the country's import and export law for having walkie-talkies at her home. On Wednesday, the military regime hit Suu Kyi with a second criminal charge accusing her of holding an election campaign event last year, which the junta claimed breached coronavirus restrictions under natural disaster management laws. Kin Mang Zhao said he has not been allowed to meet with Suu Kyi in person and is worried about the confidentiality of their discussions over video or phone calls. At the next hearing from the judge, prosecutor and defense lawyer will discuss the complexity of case and work out a time frame for proceedings and schedule for witnesses. Kin Mang Zhao says if the case is classed as simple, it could be wrapped up in 6 months, but if deemed more complex, it could drag out for a year or more. At Tuesday's hearing, Kin Mang Zhao Jr., colleague was barred from being inside the room with the judge and prosecutor who could see Suu Kyi by video link. The United States and Britain condemned the new charge against Suu Kyi and renewed demands for her release. More than 450 people have been arrested since the coup, according to the Assistance Association for Political Prisoners Monitoring Group.
And Myanmar's anti-coup protesters returned to the streets in force in Yangon's biggest demonstration since troops fanned out around the country to quell opposition to the new military junta. Now, earlier, the U.S. condemned a new charge slapped on Myanmar's deposed civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and renewed its demands for her release. Let's listen in.
You mentioned the additional charges against Aung San Suu Kyi. I think it's fair to say that we are disturbed by reports that the military has charged State Counsel Aung San Suu Kyi with additional criminal acts. As we have before, we call on the Burmese military to immediately release all unjustly detained civilian and political leaders.
Are you defending the indefensible?
Said Myanmar's military regime has hit deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi with a second charge, and this time under the country's natural disaster management law. Since she was ousted from power, she has already been charged under the country's import and export law for having walkie-talkies in her home. Thousands of people rallied in Yangon, the nation's biggest city, with protesters blockading roads with vehicles to stop the security forces from moving around the commercial capital. Much of the country has been in open revolt since troops deposed Aung San Suu Kyi's government at the start of the month and charged her under an obscure import law. Wednesday's crowds came in defiance of more violent efforts by the regime to bring resistance to heel following nationwide street protests and a disobedience campaign encouraging civil servants to strike. Tom Andrews, the UN Special Rapporteur for Myanmar, said he was worried the situation was spiraling out of control. He also warned that troops at all levels of the military chain of command will be held accountable for the coup and repression of protests.
Know this, even if you are down the chain of command, a soldier perhaps, someone on the streets, to simply say that I was following orders is not an excuse. It is not a justification. And everybody, no matter where you are on the chain of command, you will be held accountable. We're watching.
The corruption trial of Malaysia's scandal-plagued former First Lady will proceed after a judge ruled Thursday that prosecutors had presented sufficient evidence to make a case, boosting efforts to bring her to justice. Rosma Mansor will now present her defense in the next stage of the case and told the Kuala Lumpur High Court she will take the stand to testify. Let's listen in.
We have produced a Paraquan, which is a certificate by a doctor who says she's unfit to attend court. Most courts will abide with the Paraquan. But His Lordship here, we ordered her to be present today. Despite her ill condition, she came from hospital. Proceedings went all right. I can't say anything else beyond that, can I? But you can see from my internal feelings that I'm not too happy about it.
Notorious for her overseas shopping trips and vast collection of handbags, she became a lightning rod for public anger as the government of Prime Minister Najib Razak was engulfed by graft allegations. Her husband's long-ruling coalition suffered a shock election defeat in 2018, in large part due to claims he and his officials plundered billions of dollars from the 1MDB Sovereign Wealth Fund. Both the former leader and his wife were hit with multiple charges over the looting of the investment vehicle, and last year Najib was handed a 12-year jail term after being convicted in a 1MDB-linked trial. Rosma's first trial does not, however, center on 1MDB, but on allegations she received bribes linked to a government project. Prosecutors allege she pocketed 6.5 million ringgit equivalent to $1.6 million, for helping companies secure the project to provide solar power generators to schools on the Malaysian part of Borneo Island. The 69-year-old is also accused of soliciting a further 187.5 million ringgit. She faces 3 counts of corruption in the trial, which began a year ago, and denies all charges against her. Najib, who is free on bail as he appeals his conviction, turned up at court to show support for his wife. The couple's lavish lifestyles came to symbolize the perceived corrupt in Malaysia's ruling elite. Following the 2018 election, police discovered valuables including cash, jewelry, and luxury handbags worth up to $273 million in properties linked to them.
In other news, the former chief priest of Singapore's oldest Hindu temple has been charged with repeatedly pawning gold religious ornaments for a total of $1.5 million, according to court officials. Now, Kandasamy Senapati would redeem the pawned ornaments when he had raised enough money and then returned them to the temple, according to local media. But his ruse was uncovered when he could not get enough cash to buy the gold back after the coronavirus pandemic hit. The 37-year-old Indian national worked at the Sri Mariamman Temple, a 194-year-old ornately decorated place of worship in downtown Singapore that is popular with devotees and tourists alike. He's accused of having pawned the gold items 5 times between 2016 and 2020 when he was still chief priest. Temple authorities discovered the items were missing during an audit, and he was arrested and later stripped of his role as a chief priest. Kandasamy later managed to redeem the gold items and return them to the temple. Kandasamy was also charged with 5 counts of corruption for remitting back to India more than 141,000 Singaporean dollars in criminal proceeds from his scheme. He has been charged under laws against criminal breach of trust for pawning the items, and for each count faces up to 15 years. He faces a jail term of up to 10 years on each corruption charge. Singapore, whose population is mostly ethnic Chinese, is home to a sizable Hindu minority.
A Singaporean couple who allegedly dumped a newborn baby in the trash during a trip to Taipei 2 years ago have been placed on Taiwan's wanted list on suspicion of murder, prosecutors said Wednesday. The couple allegedly left the baby girl with placenta and umbilical cord still attached in a recycling bin in the capital in February 2019. A recycling company employee later found the girl's body wrapped in a garbage bag. Prosecutors told AFP that Lee Heng-shun, 25, and Evan K. Pei, 26, were both being sought for murder and a charge for abandonment. Singaporean media had given a slightly different spelling for the man's name, referring to him as Heng-shun Lee. Taiwan sometimes faces difficulties in pressing extradition requests because many countries do not treat it as a sovereign nation, especially those with close links to China, which regards the islands as part of its territory. On Wednesday, Taiwan's Apple Daily reported that Singaporean authorities had refused multiple requests to provide the couple's DNA samples, citing inconvenience due to the coronavirus pandemic. Prosecutors declined to comment on that report when contacted by AFP. Market traders were among the first to benefit from Indonesia's second phase of mass vaccinations against the coronavirus on Wednesday, as the government looks to right the country's pandemic-battered economy. Medical teams are now focusing on workers in close contact with the public and people over 60, authorities announced after a first phase of prioritizing health workers, 1.1 million of whom have been vaccinated according to the health ministry. The new phase was launched with the mass inoculation at Jakarta's Tanah Abang textile market, home to about 55,000 sellers. The second vaccination stage will see the elderly and workers most at risk, such as traders, teachers, police, and civil servants. Yet the Chinese Coronavac vaccine partially produced in Indonesia. Health Minister Budi Gunadi Sadikin noted at the market on Wednesday that many Indonesians were still afraid of the vaccine, but added that 77-year-old Vice President Maruf Amin had been inoculated that morning. The second vaccination stage is expected to be concluded by May 2021, reaching 38.5 million Indonesians.
In the Philippines, the country's military chief said he's giving way for other sectors, especially frontliners, to get inoculated with the coronavirus vaccines first before he himself gets vaccinated. Armed Forces of the Philippines Chief Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobejana was referring to the 25% of the AFP troops who will be vaccinated once the first doses of the vaccines arrive in the country. These troops are tasked to conduct security operations to protect the areas for vaccinations. Also included are those involved in the delivery and transportation of these vaccines to the cold storage and vaccination areas and those assigned to medical support operations. ASEAN in Focus will be right back. Stay tuned.
Innovation, digital disruption, globalization. Startups, micro, small, and medium enterprises, as well as large corporations, all face interesting challenges in the market today. Peek into the world of exciting opportunities and partnerships to drive growth with the latest business news and information. We are open for business. Your weekly dose of entrepreneurial inspiration to update you on the latest developments in the world of business. Get up close and personal with CEOs and thought leaders to help you discover valuable insights. Sharpen your instincts for smart decision making with the latest markets and economic trends, disruptive ideas, global innovation, social entrepreneurship, and other leading-edge business ideas. Join the conversations to create a more vibrant environment for entrepreneurship. Catch Open for Business, from vision to action.
Welcome back to ASEAN in Focus. The northeast monsoon and the trough of tropical depression Aung will bring rains over parts of the country, and the Weather Bureau said it on Thursday. Aung was last seen 715 kilometers east-southeast of Hinatuan, Surigao del Sur, slowly moving westward. The TD packs maximum sustained winds of 55 kph near the center and gustiness of up to 70 kilometers per hour. Scattered rain showers and thunderstorms will be experienced over eastern Visayas, Caraga, and Davao region due to the trough of Aung, according to Pag-asa. The northeast monsoon will bring rains over Cagayan Valley, Aurora, Quezon, and Bicol region, and isolated light rains over the rest of Luzon. The rest of Mindanao will have isolated rain showers caused by localized thunderstorms. Meanwhile, strong winds and rough seas will prevail over northern Luzon. Moderate to strong winds and moderate to rough seas will be experienced over the rest of Luzon and the eastern section of the Visayas and Mindanao. Elsewhere, winds will be light to moderate with slight to moderate sea.
The National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Council, or NDRRMC, clarified that evacuations in Taal Volcano Island on Tuesday morning are preemptive measures and done for fish pen workers and families tending animals on the island. And the RRMC deputy spokesperson Mark Timbal said evacuations were ordered due to the increase in volcanic activity. Timbal said the Philippine Coast Guard also evacuated some families who have returned to the island since Taal Volcano status was lowered to alert level 1 and on March 19 last year. In a message to reporters, the PCG said at least 60 individuals have been evacuated and the number may yet increase as the evacuation is still ongoing. He also said the NDRRMC is constantly monitoring the situation. For the first time since 1977, Taal Volcano erupted on January 12, 2020, spewing ashes across Calabarzon, Metro Manila, and some parts of Central Luzon and Ilocos region. It resulted in the suspension of school classes, work, and flights near the area as the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology subsequently issued an alert level 4. On Tuesday, PHIVOC said seismic activities and changes in Taal Volcano's main crater lake have been observed on Monday, despite the volcano being under alert level 1. The PHIVOC said 50 weak tremor episodes were recorded from 5 a.m. to 3 p.m., occurring at shallow depths. Seismic activity describes earthquake occurrences in the volcano. This signals increased hydrothermal activity beneath Taal Volcano Island. And the PHIVOC also logged 68 shallow tremor episodes in the volcano island since February 13.
Due to the increasing threat for phreatic eruptions, steam-driven explosion in Taal Volcano, Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology Director Renato Solidum Jr. on Wednesday reiterated that Taal Volcano Island, Taal's permanent danger zone, is a no-entry zone. For the past 24 hours, PHIVOC recorded 69 tremor episodes lasting for 1 to 5 minutes. Here's PHIVOC's Director Renato Solidum Jr.
69, no? Anim na tremor. Ito pong tremor ay mga mahabang pag-inig at sa aming tansya, ang nangyayari po sa kasalukuyan ay hydrothermal activity. Umaakyat po yung gas mula sa magma sa ilalim at ito yung nagpapainit sa tubig sa ilalim ng Taal Volcano Island. At yung tubig na yan at yung steam o gas ay kumikilos kaya maraming paglindol. Ito rin po ang nagdudulot ng pagpapainit sa Taal Main Crater Lake at pagiging mas acidic nito. Tinitingnan, tumataas po ang posibilidad na magkaroon ng phreatic eruption or explosion tulad po nung nangyari ng initial part ng January 12, 2020 activity ng Taal Volcano. Ito pong ganitong pangamba ay makakaapekto lamang sa kasalukuyan doon sa Volcano Island mismo. Kaya tayo nag-remind, no, na wala dapat pinapahintulutang tao na pumapasok doon sa permanent danger zone na buong Volcano Island o buong isla. Yung activity sa kasalukuyan ay may kaugnayan doon sa nangyari noong January 2020 sa dahilan ng immediately after nung eruption, weeks and months after, umakyat po yung magma, no, na nag-replace o nag-resupply sa ilalim ng Taal Volcano at nandun between 4 to 5 kilometers. At yun po ang posibleng nagre-release ng gas para maging mainit ang tubig sa ilalim ng Taal Volcano Island. Kaya tayo maraming mga paglindol na susukat at pag-acidic at pag-init ng main crater. Unang-una, dapat walang tao doon. Kasi pinagbawal na po na bumalik ang mga tao sa Volcano Island. Ito isang permanent danger zone. Pangalawa at mas mahalaga, yung phreatic eruption or explosion ay mabilisan po yan o sudden. So kapag ang tao po ay natutulog doon at ninirahan, lalo na sa gabi, mahirap po silang mag-responde ng tama. Tulad nga po ng naobserbahan natin ng January 12, mabilis po ang mga pangyayari na biglang nagbabago yung kondisyon ng volcano. So bilang pag-iingat at bilang tamang paghanda sa mga panganib, ay dapat wala talagang natutulog at naninirahan doon. Pwede namang mga laga, mga palaisdaan sa Taal Lake, pero hindi sila permanente doon sa isla. Pwede naman sila sa mainland. Gusto ko lang din i-remind ang ating mga kababayan na ang iba nag-iisip na kapag sumabog ang bulkan ay mga taon na uli ang bibilangin bago ito sumabog uli. In fact, sa Taal Volcano, ang sumabog siya ng malakas ng huli noong 1965. After that, from 1960 to 1970, taon-taon, may aktibidad na pinapakita ang Taal Volcano. So, kailangan po natin pag-ingatan ng Taal Volcano. Pwede pong magkaroon ng phreatic eruption na delikado sa buhay ng mga tao. Sana, hindi tumuloy, pero nandyan parati yung threat.
The country is well prepared and ready for the arrival of the COVID-19 vaccines produced by Pfizer BioNTech Company, Vaccine Czar Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. said on Wednesday.
Talaga yung US at China po ang nangunguna.
Galvez said there are negotiations with pharmaceutical firm Pfizer to assure the mutual protection of the government and the vaccine manufacturer in the country's inoculation program. The government's agreement with Pfizer will most likely push through, he said, assuring that it will not be endangered with the latest discussions on the indemnification clause. The government, he said, has guaranteed the vaccine manufacturers that the Philippines is well prepared to conduct the massive vaccination rollout and ready to handle adverse effects of the vaccines. He cited the preparedness of the local government units, the frontliners in the healthcare sector, and the private sector for the COVID-19 vaccine rollout. The country is expecting to receive 117,000 doses of Pfizer vaccines this month. Meanwhile, Galvez said they are still waiting for the response from the Pfizer company about the country's request for the additional doses of Pfizer vaccines from the COVAX facility. The government has already sent a request letter to the management of the COVAX facility prior to the given deadline of request submission on February 14.
The World Health Organization gave emergency use approval to AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccines, meaning distribution can now start to poorer countries starved of doses to fight the pandemic. The AstraZeneca Oxford jab forms the bulk of batches being lined up through COVAX, the global program aimed at procuring and shipping out vaccines equitably around the world, regardless of wealth. Let's listen in.
We have the facility up and running to start distributing vaccines this month, February and March and June and July. And we have already secured 2 billion doses through the facility. And the good thing about the COVAX facility is that actually countries don't need to go bilaterally. When we say bilateral, countries don't need to go one by one to the different companies trying to get the best price.
Although both companies are producing the same vaccine, because they are made in different production plants, they required separate reviews and approvals. WHO emergency use listing assesses and assures the quality, safety, and efficacy of COVID-19 vaccines and is a prerequisite for vaccines to be distributed by COVAX. Last week saw the lowest number of reported weekly cases since October. So far this year, the number of weekly reported cases has fallen by almost half, from more than 5 million cases in the week of January 4 to 2.6 million cases in the week starting February 8, just 5 weeks. This shows that simple public health measures work, even in the presence of variants.
The Pfizer BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine is the only other one to have been given the WHO green light so far. AstraZeneca vaccines from India and South Korea made up almost all of the doses in the COVAX facility's first wave of distribution. The distribution list issued on February 3 broke down the program's initial 337.2 million doses. First deliveries are expected in late February. Some 145 participating economies are set to receive enough doses to immunize 3.3% of their collective population by mid-2021.
As of early February 17, As many as 40 localities in Vietnam decided to shut schools of all levels due to a resurgence in COVID-19. In the capital city of Hanoi, pupils are asked to stay at home for online study till February 28. In Hai Duong province, the biggest coronavirus hotspot in Vietnam, schools closure will last till March 2. In Ho Chi Minh City, Hanoi, Kon Tum, Binh Dinh province, Tai Nguyen province, Phu Yen province, and Baria Vung Tau province, pupils were asked to stay at home for online study till February 28. Earlier, at a virtual teleconference with the National Steering Committee for COVID-19 Prevention and Control on February 15, Deputy Minister of Education and Training, Ngo Thi Min, said that 9 students and a teacher have tested positive for coronavirus. Last year, more than 22 million students and pupils nationwide studied online for around 3 months.
In other news, a British man pleaded guilty to violating Singapore's strict coronavirus rules by having a tryst with his fiancée at a luxury hotel while under quarantine. Prosecutors are seeking 4 weeks in prison and a fine of 1,000 Singaporean dollars or $750 for Nigel Skea, less than the maximum 6 months jail term allowed. The 52-year-old arrived in September from London to visit his then fiancée, Singaporean Agatha Magesh Eyamalai, and was ordered to quarantine for 2 weeks at the hotel. On arrival, Skea texted Eyamalai, 39 years old, and details of where he was staying and booked a separate room for her at the same hotel, 12 or 13 floors higher, according to prosecutors. He then sneaked out of his room and walked up the emergency staircase to the 27th floor, where Eyamalai, who was not under quarantine, opened the emergency exit door for him. The pair spent the night together. Prosecutor Kenneth Key said the Briton had exposed others to the risk of infection by his actions. He will be sentenced on February 26. Eyamalai, who married Skea in November, pleaded guilty to helping him.
On the focus, we'll be back.
Happy Peeps! Ugaling manood ng Happy Time Monday to Friday at 12 noon dito lang sa Net25.
Happy Time, Happy Time.
Factual.
We have to defeat the virus everywhere.
Timely information. Balanced. Not only in the country, but also abroad.
I'm certain of one thing.
Interviews that people need to know. Watch Agila Pilipinas! A 1-hour newscast of reports coming from regional hubs in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. Know the important updates in Asia in ASEAN in Focus. Track the latest stories in the provinces in Agila Provincia. Tune into Mata ng Agila, the evening primetime news program of Net25. Balanced and objective, Mata ng Agila covers national and international issues, tackles news on business, health, science and technology, entertainment, sports and human interest features, and current events. And Eagle News International delivers the latest global reports, impartial, accessible, and up-to-date. It brings to fore EBC's rich international scope and access to valuable information streams.
Well, thank you to explain our help outdoor.
Catch these programs on Net25. You can also watch our news programs through eaglenews.ph and Eagle News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
ASEAN in focus. The Department of Trade and Industry is continuously rolling out programs that will assist the micro, small, and medium enterprises survive and thrive amid the pandemic. The latest initiative of the DTI is its partnership with the Bank of the Philippine Islands to facilitate workshops and programs for entrepreneurs and provide them access to working capital loans and other financial services. In a statement Wednesday, the DTI said it signed a memorandum of understanding with BPI Business Banking, adding that the latter will support the agency's programs such as the SME Roving Academy, the Kapatid Mentor Me, and Youth Entrepreneurship Program, as well as regional trade fairs. BPI Business Banking head Eric Luchanca said, "We hope that through this partnership with DTI, we will be able to make it clear to our SME customers that they are not too small to be served by a large bank." DTI Undersecretary Blastila Lantayona has underscored a commitment to help MSMEs recover from impacts brought by the global health and economic crisis.
Meanwhile, Trade Secretary Ramon Lopez supports the recommendation of Acting Socio-Economic Planning Secretary Carl Kendrick Chua to place the entire country under Modified General Community Quarantine or MGCQ next month amid the increase in joblessness and poverty rate brought by the coronavirus pandemic. It's about time we move to MGCQ after a year of lockdown, Lopez told reporters in a Viber message. Lockdown, he said, was supposed to buy us time to prepare our health system and to improve contact tracing and trace, test, treat, he said. Now, since June last year, the National Capital Region has not graduated from GCQ status, a stricter community quarantine measure than MGCQ. It even went back to much stricter Modified Enhanced Community Quarantine or MECQ from August 4 to 18 last year, as healthcare facilities in Metro Manila were overwhelmed due to the increasing number of COVID cases during that period. Lopez said, quote, "As the Philippines recovers, Metro Manila has a very weak recovery, worse in employment and hunger recovery, and that means more urban poor. The damages to malnutrition and other health and social issues will be irreversible," unquote. NCR accounted for around 40% of the Philippine gross domestic product. But Lopez added the reopening of more economic activities should depend on the COVID-19 statistics.
Singapore unveiled a fresh multi-billion-dollar package to help pandemic-battered businesses and fund a vaccination drive as part of the city-state annual budget. The coronavirus has plunged the financial hub into its worst ever recession, with the crucial aviation and tourism sectors hit particularly hard as global travel ground to a halt. Finance Minister Heng Swee Keat announced the new package totaling to 11 billion Singapore dollars as he unveiled the budget in Parliament. A substantial chunk will be allocated to helping workers and businesses still affected by the pandemic, including in the travel and aviation sectors. More than 40% of the funds will go to financing public health and measures to ensure a safe reopening of the economy, he said. This includes inoculation efforts. Vaccines are given for free to all residents, as well as the tracking of people possibly exposed to a coronavirus carrier. Heng said close to 250,000 people have received their first dose and 55,000 have had their second jab. The latest package of financial aid is on top of the nearly 100 billion SG dollars rolled out last year. Singapore's economy, which shrank a record of 5.4% last year, has started regaining strength in recent months, but Heng warned that the recovery is uneven.
Eliana and I will be back with more news from ASEAN in Focus right after this break.
Sinuli ko na yun eh.
Wala nga sana yung kawali.
Nasa inyo na, iniwan ko doon sa bahay mo. Ano gagawin natin? Hindi mo yung kawali.
Ilabas niyo yung kawali ko. Ako ang gagawin mong bagong OIC habang wala ka dito sa barangay. Di ba, kuya?
Ha? Ang sabi, papalit ko ang gera para sa World Free. Dahil sa kawaling yun.
Wala lang ko ba?
Papatin! Tinutulakan yung butas ko.
Grabe naman na yun na.
Sumaya tayong lahat. Saya-saya.
Events happen around us all the time. In our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced, eager news, because we live in interesting times.
What's up guys? Ako nga pala si Kyle Juliano at abangan niyo po ako bilang guest performer sa Letters and Music ngayong darating na Sabado po yan. That's Feb 20, 1 p.m. to 2 p.m. Siyempre dito lamang sa Net25.
Hey there, Arnie Aquino here at Hatley Castle, one of the filming locations for the X-Men series. Don't forget to tune in to Digital Nest only on Net25.
It's time to take one step further and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Durians falling from trees are collected in nets on a farm in Malaysia, where a long lockdown has slowed domestic demand and left traders more reliant on China's appetite for the world's smelliest fruit. Take a look.
But right now, because of this COVID pandemic, the local side actually dropped tremendously. Our drop is about 80 to 90% of the sales because people are not allowed to come out. If there's no exports or when there's any stop of the export, I think it will collapse the whole industry.
EBC Jakarta Bureau's December Paras shows us how a toned-down Chinese New Year was celebrated in Indonesia. December
Today, Chinese all over the world celebrate the Lunar New Year. But with the current pandemic situation, the Chinese festivity here in Jakarta, Indonesia will be different from the previous years. The Indonesian Chinese population normally celebrate Chinese New Year by visiting their families and relatives. In the past, malls are usually filled with many mall goers to celebrate the Chinese New Year. But this year's celebrations are encouraged to be carried out at home, just like what has been announced earlier by the Chinese Indonesian Association here. The association urged people to celebrate Chinese New Year online and appealed not to travel for family visitations to help break the chain of spreading COVID-19 during Chinese New Year. Apart from this, events that are usually held during Chinese New Year that potentially generate crowds will also be eliminated. An example of which is the staging of the Lion Dance Show, which is usually held in malls. This was announced by Mr. Alfonso Wijaja, the chairman of the Indonesian Shopping Center Management Association, or APPBI, as reported by TheTick.com last January 15, 2021. This year, it is estimated that the number of shoppers and mall goers will be greatly reduced. However, the current situation of the world does not affect Chinese New Year celebration in the schools here in Jakarta, Indonesia. Although the usual gathering of students in school to witness a lion dance performance was postponed, this year's celebration is held virtually. Teachers hold classes online where students were led to activities such as traditional lantern making, Chinese arts, storytelling of their Chinese culture and traditions, and virtual singing and dance performances. The pandemic has greatly impacted our lives in so many ways, but regardless of the obstacles, people will always find ways to connect with their loved ones in the celebration of the New Year. Reporting from Jakarta, Indonesia, this is December Paras. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, December, and thank you, Eliana, for joining me today. How is it in Vietnam now? How are you doing?
Here, Alma, in Da Nang, Vietnam, so far there are no cases, but of course people are still encouraged to take the safety measures and wear masks in public. However, in areas that are highly affected, the distancing measures are imposed and people are asked to be more careful.
Thank you very much, Eliana.
Thank you so much, Alma. Stay safe too. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
Thank you, Eliana. Enjoy, and we'll see you back tomorrow for more of ASEAN in Focus. I'm Alma Angeles, and we live in interesting times.